Hello everyone. Look, I think the intention for this particular session is that we'll have basically a rolling run of ministers who'll be available to you for your questions, so you can see them at the back. We've got Minister Henare, Davis, Jackson, Sepaloni and Whaitiri, and I believe we'll have... and Minister Mahuta is hiding around the corner, so we'll have a full suite of ministers available to you for any portfolio-specific questions, and we'll try and keep it reasonably brief for you. So look, I'm here to kick off. I understand I'm here for about five minutes.
So how proud are you of that $1 billion Māori budget?
This is a significant budget for so many reasons, but what we're trying to do here is make sure that we are making investments that are good for our people and that are good for the economy. So we expect that actually we'll be, in many cases, two birds with one stone. The investments we make will also see extra stimulus in our economy across a range of areas, whether it's building new houses, whether or not it's putting money into the pockets of low-income families, and they'll be out spending that in our economy. That's exactly the kind of decisions we need to make as we recover.
You're hoping to lift 33,000
I'll put you in there.
You're hoping to lift 33,000 children out of poverty. What's going to happen in those children's lives when you lift them out of poverty?
What we've done today is about targeting need and helping to provide just simply the basics. Food on the table, enabling families to be able to pay a power bill or just make sure that their children have the basics. And I think it's an acknowledgement here of the fact that these increases, whilst compared to previous decades, will make a big difference. Actually, we're coming off a low base. Families have had very low incomes in New Zealand while they've been on government support.
Money has been money's been announced to establish the Māori Health Authority.
Yes.
In your thinking around the budget, I know that there's an advisory group that's going to do much of the work around what the Māori Health Authority will look like and how its targets, etc. But have you given any thought yet to how much money will actually go into that?
Obviously, the first stage is establishing the Māori Health Authority itself, and there is a bit of a view to some very early pilot-based commissioning work. But essentially, this is about establishing the authority. We've now brought in Tā Mason Drury to help us with some of the fundamental design of the authority, but please do not assume that this is the substantive funding for the work of the authority itself.
House prices are scheduled to drop dramatically. Well, not drop, the rate
House
of
price growth.
Thank you, yes. Is suggested it will drop dramatically.
Yep.
Is that what you would like to see? Are those your goals?
Yes.
Treasury
Yes. Well, as we've said, what's been happening to house prices in New Zealand, that growth has just been exponential. And that's not good for anyone. Yes, for New Zealanders, this is, in most cases, their most significant assets. So we don't want to see the value of their house bottom out, but nor do we want a situation where it's simply inaccessible to buy a house. You can see on page 13 what's forecast to happen. What we see is the growth in house prices is looking to come down by June 2022 to just 0.9%. And of course, with the changes we've made, that's exactly what we'd hope to see.
And you'll take action to make it happen?
Well, certainly this is based on the decisions the government has taken, and this is now Treasury's estimates as what will happen as a result.
Prime Minister,
Barry, and then I'll come to you, Henry.
Prime Minister, how do you think the large number of National Party voters that came over to Labour at the last election will view this budget?
I think, Barry, they see need in the same way that we do. And regardless, I think people see the cost that poverty brings to bear, not only on children and their families, but on the wider economy. I think everyone in New Zealand, regardless of how they vote, want to see our children thrive. They want to see them do well, and they want to see them fulfil their potential. And what we've done here today is actually about trying to do the very best by children in New Zealand. When you think about the fact that what we've done is actually only taking us back to the levels that we saw in the 1990s, you can see just how far behind we'd allowed those rates to fall. The other point I'd make is actually even with these changes, we're still, in many measures, a bit behind even where Australia sits on some of their benefit measures, as best as I can compare.
You've made quite a lot of changes to the job seeker benefit today.
Yeah.
But are you actually intending to mostly make that benefit almost obsolescent with the unemployment insurance? Is that largely going to replace it?
So it's a good question, but of course, what social insurance is intended to do is to stop economic scarring at a time where, particularly when you see large-scale events like global financial crisis or the Christchurch earthquakes or indeed COVID-19. Then when you see large-scale job loss, of course, there's individuals who have built their lives around having a certain level of income, and so the scarring from that can be traumatic. What a social insurance scheme intends to do is try and ease that period, so if there is job loss, provide some certainty of income while they transition to another part of the economy and while they get another job. Of course, that does not remove your need for a job seeker benefit, because globally, social insurance schemes are time limited. They run out. And if it's the case, even when you have interventions to support people into work, if they do not find it, you then still need the safety net. But what it does do is ease the period so you don't have that jarring impact and the economic scarring that I've talked about.
Is it fair that it's going to be so much more than someone would make on the job seeker, just because they might have a high-paying job?
Yeah, and look, I mean, what we want is something that is available to anyone, regardless of whether or not they're in a low-paid or a high-paid job, and that's why we're talking about maximums and minimums to sit in there to try and bring that fairness. In the same way you have a cap on ACC. It's why, for fairness, we've also said we want to look at how it might apply to someone who becomes ill or disabled while working, because that's one of the things that the social sector raises an unfairness question. But in terms of having this as something that occurs through job loss, it doesn't remove the need to still have, essentially what is a tiered regime so that you can prepare yourself if your income is going to drop below social insurance and prepare yourself if you are going to find yourself on the government safety net.
When the Children's Commissioner read the budget,
of course, the models that we see globally, Barry, are similar to a ACC-style model. There's a lot of conversation yet to be had with business representatives, but keep in mind it was actually through the Future of Work group and Business New Zealand that they were advocating for a model like this. I'll try and canvas around
How
it.
confident are you with the Māori budget announcement that that's actually going to be enough to help lift Māori out of poverty?
Well, look, we know from some of the estimates that, for instance, for the child poverty initiatives, that even though we estimate about 33,000 children, up to 33,000 children will be lifted out of poverty, there's an estimate that it will benefit at least 13,000 Māori children. And given the impact of the disproportionate impact of poverty on Māori children, we need to see that number of children and more lifted by initiatives like this. Also on housing, it's a fact that we have low rates of Māori home ownership. That means we do need these targeted initiatives that are focused on bringing housing alongside iwi and hapu into the market to ensure we have higher rates of Māori home ownership.
Enough money to build the structure as well as really get the mahi done at the community.
And again, this is where I'd say it really is about building the infrastructure. So this is our starting point, building the Māori Health Authority. We may see some lower levels of commissioning in the beginning. This is not the full funding of the Māori Health Authority. We should be really
when the
clear.
Children's Commissioner
Can we
read
start
the
with just a
budget,
couple of questions, and then I'm just aware of who I haven't had. I'll come to you and then to Claire.
when the Children's Commissioner read the budget this afternoon and he saw that money being spent to help children in poverty, he said hallelujah. When you got 3.3 billion over the line to help children out of poverty, what did you think?
For me, I look at this in two ways. I think all New Zealanders want to see children doing well. It's one of the values I think we hold as Kiwis. We don't like to think of ourselves as a place that has persistent child poverty, and that is what we are trying to address here. But at the same time, we're recovering from COVID. So what better than an investment that not only helps our kids, but helps stimulate our economy, get money spent in our local economies, and help continue to see job growth and job creation.
One word, what do you think? Relief? Elation?
Oh, for me, the work is never done. So today, this is a milestone, but we keep going. And I had Claire, you'll be my last question.
at the other side of the event, what do you think that workers and so-called middle New Zealand will see in this budget for them?
Yeah, and here we see $57 billion investment into infrastructure. Now, that not only means that we strengthen our health and our education services, which are so important to every New Zealander, the investment in infrastructure up and down the country means jobs, means we're creating a pipeline of work. And that's exactly what New Zealanders are asking us to do. While we recover from COVID-19, invest in the kinds of initiatives that fix the deficits that we've had as a nation, but create jobs at the same time. Thanks, everyone.